okay, this is a trigger. This is a moment. I can think about how I want to react. 20, when I didn't have these resources, was to completely numb out. It was a lot of fun, or it felt like a lot of fun at the time, but it wasn't very sustainable. Honoring that it's a practice, and it's okay if you get it wrong the first dozen times.
That is shadow work.
It's about integration.
Yeah.
Not about just going towards the light. It's about integrating both sides of it.
Welcome to episode 57 of Super States, Practices of Transformation, with me, your host, Joshua Peters. Super States explores the intersection of trance states with personal or professional growth. And in every episode, we talk to world-class experts, industry leaders, revolutionary thinkers, people who share with us the latest information, different tools, along with their personal stories, inspiring us on our journey. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast through your favorite podcast host or subscribe on YouTube. That way you can stay up to date with all the new episodes. And if you enjoy this show, please give me a 5-star review. That is the best way to help the show grow. This week, my guest is Brandy Walker. Brandy is a therapist and a coach dedicated to helping people transform their lives through a blend of psychodynamic therapy and comprehensive resource models. With a focus on emotional regulation, inner child work, and shadow integration, Brandy guides her clients to reconnect with their true selves and uncover their innate gifts. Open your mind to new possibilities by healing through the inner child and shadow work with Brandy Walker. Welcome to Super States. I am here today with Brandy Walker. Brandy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's so good to be here.
I'm excited to have you on the show. Brandy, tell us what you do, how that transforms lives.
Well, that is a deep question.
Yeah.
I'm a therapist, and I also am a coach. I create content, but most of my I guess the transformative lives part of is my work as a therapist. Um, I I'm used to being all of my therapy work is done virtually, so I'm used to being on camera, not used to being recorded. But yeah, that's what I do.
And tell us a little bit about the way that you help people. So I know you have a little bit of a unique approach.
Yeah, well, so I had mentioned before a solution focused psychodynamic approach. Um, it's interesting because when I was in grad school, psychodynamic therapy, and I'll explain what that is,
Mm-hmm.
was not really was sort of it was not really in vogue. It was much more like cognitive behavioral, and like not necessarily solution focused, but I would say like present focused. Um, Psychodynamic, the term kind of means I mean, you would think of um, Freud, right? But it's come a long way since Freud. It's um, it's connecting with your inner child and working on the shadow parts of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and then also for me, as a human being who has this sense that there's something bigger going on in the world, I feel like if a client is willing to go to explore past lives or their ancestor work, I'm very comfortable going kind of where the client needs to go. I'm trained in a modality called comprehensive resource model, and that essentially is an attachment. Like use the principles of attachment. So like, um, you know, like uh, a, building a secure attachment with your child is what you can think of,
Okay.
what attachment principles are, or with your spouse or with whomever you're in a relationship with.
Right.
But we are working to reattach to our younger selves
Mm.
and connect to our younger selves, in a way that feels safe and feels like we have the resources to do that, in like in a meditation. So we're going into like a meditative state, and we're connecting to, say, our 6-year-old self, um, and really like learn like developmentally when we are younger, the a lot of the traumatic experiences come from, we didn't have the tools to understand like what was going on at the time, so it registered as traumatic. And
Mm.
a lot of times the adults in our lives didn't have the tools to explain that to us. So the cool thing about like the way our brains work is that we can actually go back there and have a conversation with that part of ourselves and say, like, hey, it's okay, you're safe, and I got you, and they were wrong, or like allow yourself to say whatever you need to say. Yeah, so that's kind of what I do.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that is powerful healing work right there. That is healing the shadow right there.
Yeah.
Share with us how you got to this point. Like, what? Tell us your origin story.
um I uh I was kind of a sensitive kid, um, and I came from very like pragmatic, like salt of the earth, parents who didn't really like, So I grew up kind of being told I was too sensitive, you
Hmm.
know, for most of my life, and really internalized that, and I wasn't like doing it fast enough or doing like I was just kind of like off in my own like field of flowers, and like we had like things to do, and I think that led to like me coming of age and not having any tools at 20, cuz like I'm 42, and so um I was thinking about this solution focused psychodynamic approach, right? Like, I'm in this weird, like, in between, like, generation millennial and in between generation X. So, like,
Hmm.
we, I think the Gen X is like the practical part of me. Like, we got to like figure it out. And then the millennials, like, but let's like go and talk to our inner child and like really like you know connect with our shadow and all of that. And so I wh- a coping mechanism at 20 when I didn't have these resources was to completely numb out and um while out and like it was a lot of fun, or it felt like a lot of fun at the time, but it
Hmm.
wasn't very sustainable. And then I had this like narrative of like I'm a screw up, I can't get my life together, and really I think struggled in my 20s and early 30s to feel like I like could like make it and like hack it.
Hmm.
And so the epiphany as I got into my 40s was like at some point along the way I decided that like my sensitive, like that part of myself that contains really like the gifts, I think a lot of the gifts couldn't be trusted because she was not like strong enough, like I couldn't hack it, right? And so I pushed her aside and like did the thing I felt like I was supposed to do, but it wasn't joyful. And
Mm.
so a lot of this, me doing this work for myself and coming back to myself and reconnecting with that like sensitive like kid in the flower field was like that was transformative for me.
Yeah. And that was something that you did when you were in grad school, you said?
Uh it was a lot of it was I mean it was happening while I was in grad school, but it really was like my own journey. I started meditating around that time, like 2016, 17,
Mhm.
and um, and and found like I had always been into kind of like weird spiritual stuff, but really found a grounded meditation practice and started to do some of this work on my own.
Okay. And what would you say has changed the most from when you first started practicing to where you are now?
So what's cool in the practical part is like I feel like I have a lot of a lot so I have emotional regulation skills.
Hmm.
So like um the difficulty of being like a highly sensitive person, which is kind of how I would classify myself. Um and I think that a lot of people get a lot of labels. So um for
Mhm.
them that might be anxiety, depression, bipolar, borderline. I'm not saying that people don't have these disorders, but I think that when we don't know how to emotionally regulate. So what regardless of what the kind of baseline disorder is or what it what that how it manifests, right? Um learning those emotional regulation skills through meditation, working into doing this inner child work and stuff, um, that has been that's been powerful for me. It's been powerful for my kids and my family. Like it has
Yeah.
it is very practical. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. No, what I'm hearing is the regardless of what kind of challenge that we have, whether it's anxiety, anything,
Hmm.
the biggest kind of change we can make is to learn to regulate our own emotions, to not be at the whim of the anxiety that comes up. So basically, we might still feel anxious, but we
Hmm.
have now tools on how to manage that.
Yeah, yeah.
And what are some of those tools?
Um, I I think that I'm really interested in. Are you familiar with energy psychology?
Energy psychology, no.
So have you heard of EFT, like
Yes, for sure. Yep.
tapping is like a really great like skill that you can basically do anywhere. um Simple breathing exercises. It really is the very start of it is like getting to a place where you can pause, like when you're triggered, like when you have
Mhm.
that like something happens,
Yeah.
get an email, like your kid like explodes in some way, like before you react, like taking a breath or stepping outside, um and just kind of like, okay, this is a trigger, this is a moment, and I can think about how I want to react. I am feeling anxious, angry, disgusted, whatever it is. And I can feel that and I can recognize that those emotions or those thoughts that I'm thinking, they're not me. And I can
Mm.
I they are part of me. They are, part of the whole, but they're not the sum of my experience, because that's what they feel. It feels like all of us in that moment, but just kind of like, oh, okay. And I can do it shaking and I can do it like messy. and it doesn't have to look very pretty, but I can just take a moment and then I can be like, okay, like, do I need to like call someone for help? What is my body doing right now? Um, do I need to just like take like step outside? How do I want to proceed rather than like jumping and then thinking about, oh, did I want to do that?
Right. Yeah. I like that, and I think of that like um responding instead of reacting, right? So the
Mhm.
first time when you're just in the mix of all of the feelings
Mm,
and you just have an automatic reaction, there's no thought to that. That's
mm,
letting the trigger bring up the feeling and then kind of doing whatever it is that you do, which might be, I don't know, yelling at somebody or
mhm.
running away or whatever it happens to be,
Yeah.
where you're talking about taking a breath. First of all, recognizing that you're
Yes.
in
Yeah.
the reaction or at least in the feeling, and then just pausing, noticing what you feel, what do you need, and then responding to that need.
Yeah. Yeah. And remember it like re- honoring that it's a practice, and it's okay if you get it wrong the first like
Yeah.
dozen times. It's a skill that you can continue to build on.
I really like that you just brought that up again because that's actually really important. That's going from you have to be perfect at this to
Mhm.
let's have a little grace. We're all learning and mistakes are actually helpful.
Yeah, well, and everybody has different moments, and so you might like figure it out and feel like, okay, I got this, and then something comes up that's like brand new or that's like an old, like an ancient trigger, and you feel like,
Mm.
oh, I'm back to like square one, and you're not. It's all part of it. It's all part of like our evolution.
So we talked about shadow work a little bit earlier, but could you define what shadow work is from your perspective?
Yeah, I I think that as I understand it, it is a part of ourself that we don't um that we're not very aware of. It could be um it could be the part of our that we're ashamed of, that was not deemed socially acceptable, that we push down, that we are not even like cognizant of because we won't let ourselves. And I've found that for those of us who, and probably people listening to your podcast, like those of us in like the personal development world, we know those parts of ourselves because we've been doing this work for a while,
Mhm.
um and we've made some peace with our shadow. um I think that you can have a like what's called a golden shadow, so like the parts that are like the world would like the world would say is amazing, but we felt like in our family or in our culture or society, it just that wasn't acceptable.
I've never heard the term golden shadow before. I like that. So it's like the part of us that is perfectly fine, but for whatever reason we are not accepting it.
Yep, yep. Like a someone who uh, their um their persona is very tough, right? And so they have like a soft, like gentle, tender side, but they're not going to show that because that's weakness to them. That was
Mm.
deemed like not acceptable.
Hmm. Got it. And so, as you have been doing this work, what led you to being interested in past lives? Because that was another kind of one of those elements that you talked about.
Hmm. I I had a well, this is I don't know how out there you want to go, but I I
You can
had
go as far out as you want to go.
uh, a friend of mine in 2017 did like a it was a psychic aura reading. It's I don't know if you're familiar with Nancy Rebecca's work, but
Mm,
she is and really incredible, gifted, like clairvoyant. It was She didn't give me the reading, but the person that gave me the reading was trained through
okay.
her work, um, and um, in that reading, they go through all of the elements of your each chakra system, um, and there are symbols and messages that come up within each chakra, and in one of them, what came up was like a past life, and it was it struck me like it like was an interesting thing. It was like in the 1500 or 1500s or something like that. But what she described was like a queen or a princess in like Spain, and so I looked it up, and I found um, a historical figure that closely aligned to what like
Okay.
had come up in this reading,
Yeah.
and it was interesting because it was like her name is Joanna the Mad. She was like a Spanish princess, I think in like 1590s or something like that, but she ultimately was committed to a convent for like from the time she was 30 until like the rest of her life, um and they basically deemed like mentally unstable, um but it felt very powerful at the time of my life because I was in grad school
Mm,
to become a therapist, and it felt like restorative, and I had um like I mentioned earlier, like I didn't have the emotional regulation skills when I was younger, and so if I had gone to see a psychiatrist, I'm sure I would have been diagnosed with some sort of like like serious mental disorder. And so it felt restorative, and it felt like, okay, like I don't know if this is true, but this feels healing in my life. And so
mm,
I then from there I started to do more research and got started to read like every book I could find by Brian Weiss. Dr. Brian Weiss, are you familiar?
mm-mm.
He hasn't done a lot lately, I think since the pandemic, but he was a psychiatrist who was trained as a hypnotherapist
Okay.
and in the 80s, and ended up one of his patients had like a spontaneous past life memory,
Hmm.
and it sent him down this path, and he's like it's and he now teaches like at the Omega Institute, he teaches like
Okay.
how to do past life regression therapy, and yeah.
Great. So you read his stuff and
Mhm.
started using this with clients?
um I do it as a life coach. CRM actually does go into past lives. I have not done that a ton in therapy. I think I meet the client where
Hmm.
they are. So if they want to go there, then we can, but I'm not going to bring it up, and I'm not going to, you know, suggest that this issue they're having is a past life
Yeah.
issue. Yeah.
Good on you because not everybody does that.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your life coaching aspect then, because
Hmm.
mostly we've just been talking about the therapy side.
Hmm.
What are the kinds of people that you help with life coaching?
Yeah, so my life coaching is actually called Not Therapy. And it really does hone in on inner child, um, shadow work, past life work, ancestral work. And like, I feel like what I aim to do is create a blueprint for an individual who maybe has tried, um, psychotherapy and hasn't had a lot of, and tried different things, and have, um it just hasn't, like, traditional talk therapy hasn't been super helpful. So coaching looks a lot like like a guided meditation. Sometimes it can be more like practical, like we're talking, and
Mhm.
um but I am helping them go into uh the spaces of their inner child, um connect with their shadow, really. So I think shadow work for me is making, like, love, this is not from me. There's a really, I think, great book on shadow work called Existential Kink, and she
Mhm.
talks about loving and allowing our shadow. So our and I use it in conjunction with archetype work, uh and so that's uh maybe Carl Jung. I don't know if you're familiar. He is
Mhm.
also like a father of psychotherapy, but there's this idea that we all have different, like, I don't know, character, like, so the hero, the villain, the
Yeah.
mother, the slave, that, we
It's
all
almost
have
like
these.
a internal mythology.
Yes, yes, yes. And so I think often there is an archetype running the show that is connected to this shadow that is coming up. And so when I'm doing shadow work with a person, we're connecting with what is that archetype, and what function are they serving, because the idea is they're protector parts, like they're trying to help.
Mhm.
And so we just acknowledge, accept, like, love them, and often that is all you have to do. Um,
Mhm.
if that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Like what comes to me is how much because I do something similar with clients too,
Hmm.
and a lot of times there's this part of a client that is in charge of the problem, or to make it simple, and it's almost always like you described, trying to keep them safe, and the strategy that it uses kind of messed up, doesn't really work, but it's got good intentions.
Hmm. Hmm.
Many times the client wants to just like cut them off, like, I'm ready to assassinate this thing, but it's not about that. It's like you said, let's accept it, love it, and maybe give it a better strategy to get
Hmm.
success. And a lot of times that is the coming together with the shadow. Like that is shadow work. That
Yeah.
loving and accepting of all the different parts of us.
Yeah, it's because it's about integration,
Yeah.
not about just going towards the light, or the good, or yeah,
Yeah.
whatever you want to. Yeah, it's about integrating both sides of us.
And I'm glad you brought up existential king because that is oh, I was really blown away by that book when I read it, and it's made a huge impact um, on how to look at these kinds of labeled negative feelings, the things that we label
Mhm.
as negative, right? Yeah.
What and I find that her, like, work, that existential kink work on whatever is coming up, like, whatever, if you're trying, I don't know if manifesting is a word that you use, but like co-creating, whatever, like if you're trying to make something happen and it's not happening, and you get curious about what part of you doesn't, like, actually doesn't want the thing, um it I found it's like practical magic, like it happens, so, like, the thing, um like, once you acknowledge that and give that a name, like, I found that it really works well with manifesting, and like
Mm.
creating your life, and yeah.
Yeah, because there's a part of us that's getting in that's like not wanting the thing. There's a what does she say in Existential Kink? Having is evidence of wanting.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that
Yeah.
idea, That really stuck with me because
Mhm,
that's a really good way of understanding, okay, I don't want this thing, but I have this thing, so I must part of me wants this thing,
mhm.
wants this feeling or whatever it is. So,
Yeah.
yeah, don't need mean to go down the rabbit hole of existential kink, but it is a really great book. So if you haven't read that one out there and you're
Mhm,
interested in shadow work, it
mhm.
would be a great place to go. So based on your experience, I mean, you have a wide experience with both your own journey as an intuitive and a highly sensitive person. Then you have this training as therapist and a life coach. What would you say is a simple thing that somebody could do to help start to integrate their shadow?
Um, like the first thing that comes to mind is practice self-compassion.
Mm,
Um, Dr. Kristen Neff talks about the three components of self-compassion, self-kindness, saying like, this is hard, talking to yourself like you would a friend, and then mindfulness and shared human experience. Um, I think that we are not taught to be very kind to ourselves because our parents weren't taught to be very kind to themselves, and not always, but it's there. I think that that's like a really practical, like it seems like very therapist-y thing to say, but it's like it it works. I think that the resistance towards self-compassion is often, well, if I'm kind to myself, then I won't get anything done, or I won't like I what my anxiety is is actually keeping me functioning,
yeah,
um, which I think points us back to shadow work. So if you're feeling some resistance to me saying that, um, then I encourage you to kind of explore that and see what comes up.
yeah. That that practice of self compassion is pretty vital.
Hmm.
We almost never talk to other people the way we talk to ourselves.
Hmm.
And I recognize that what you said about anxiety and people want thinking that it's helping them. I mean, I suppose at some level that is true, but I don't think that they need it to
Hmm.
have those same kinds of
Hmm.
results, but that's what they're using now. That's again, the strategy that a part of them has used to get the result that they want.
Yeah. Well, and it's a coping skill. Like all coping skills, they worked for a period of time, and um, when they begin to like cause us harm or cause us angst, then we may find that we don't ever have to change. We don't ever have to stop using our anxiety, as a way to get things done. But we may find that we might want to consider a better way, and it might be more effective if we're willing to explore that.
Yeah. So if this is resonating with somebody who's watching or listening to this episode, is there anything that they need to kind of watch out for? Are there any certain uh, any kind of risks to starting to explore these kind of ideas?
I think that for people who have had a lot of trauma or a lot of traumatic experiences, um, it is maybe helpful to do this work with a guide, with a therapist, with a coach, with someone that you trust. Um, you absolutely, I think that we can self heal. I think that we can do it on our own or in a group, but I think that when there's been a lot of trauma, and especially when there was an adult in their life, like in the forefront of their life, who um, was was not did not have the capacity to act in their best interest. I think that it's these types of um, explorations can bring up some stuff that it's helpful to have some support when it comes up,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, yeah. I hope that makes
No,
sense.
no, yeah, that resonates a lot, and that's because sometimes those can be really surprisingly impactful. And I know, just as somebody has done some of that work himself, sometimes just tuning into those feelings like brings up all these different memories that take us
Hmm.
back to places that we hadn't expected. So
Hmm.
that's the kind of thing that you're
Yeah,
talking about, especially if you are someone who has what you call traumatic experiences.
yeah,
It is helpful to have a guide who can hold that space for you and with you.
yeah. Most of the work that I've done has been. I mean, was in therapy for several years, and I do work like with coaches of my own, but a lot of the work I've done I has been solo. I've been doing my own self work. Um, but sometimes it can just like, and sometimes it can just gut you, is what I was about to say. I
Mhm.
think that you can, like, that's okay. And you can handle that. And especially if, like, I had the benefit of having adults in my life who always had my best interest. They don't really maybe have the ability to talk about these things in the way that I would love to talk about them. But I knew they always
Mhm.
had my back, and so um, I found that I can do that, even though I've had some traumatic experiences. I'm adopted, and I heard someone say recently, like, adoption is trauma, and I think that there's something to that.
Mhm.
Um, but I know my birth mom, and she has my back, and I know my parents and they have my, so
Mhm.
um even as deep things have come up, like I did basically I would say, I don't know if it's like really a past life, but an inner child um meditation where um I realized that, so my mom was 18 when she was pregnant with me. She was working at McDonald's making like $3 an hour. And um, she ultimately, like pretty far into her pregnancy, decided to put me up for adoption because she wanted to give me like a better life. And I had known that story for most of my adult life. And, but it just in the meditation was so like, oh, like the very foundation of like me and her womb, like, there's not enough money for me to exist. And
Mm.
that realization and the way that it's played out in my life and the financial experiences that I've had was like, oh, like it was just like mind blowing. Um, and, and, and I was able to do it by myself, but it would arguably have been helpful to be doing that with a guide. If that makes sense. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Brandy, what is making you excited about the future?
Um, well, I think that um, there's, I think that we're at like sort of a turning point, and there is some evidence to suggest that there is a lot more good happening than maybe what we might watch on the nightly news.
Mhm.
And I think that if we can focus on like the things, the the magic within ourselves, and the magic that I think we are really actually experiencing all around the world. Like, for example, and this is sort of weird, but I have been seeing so many, maybe it's just social media, but I've been seeing so many posts, like not super like weird out there uh people or like influencers saying
Sure.
like, look, I'm like this animal seems to be communicating with me, and like they're like being kind to this other animal, but like I don't think in my lifetime I've seen that degree of like that sort of connection, and I've always felt a deep connection with animals. But I
Mhm.
think that like I think that Mother Earth is waking up. I think that the animals have been, maybe we're waking up and then we're just noticing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And Brandy, how can people learn more about you?
I uh my website is either brandyglows.com or Luca Holistic Luke lucacounseling.com, I think is the is I'm like blanking on the, it's not up yet. I'll send it to you. I'll make sure
Yeah,
you
well,
have
I'll
the
make
right
sure
one.
my
Yeah,
people get in touch with your people and we
right.
get the correct links before this goes live. Uh,
Okay.
Brandy, what's the one insight that you would like all the audience to leave with today?
You have, I think you have like a lot of gifts within you, and your shadow or the pain points in your life have the capacity to directly point to what those gifts are.
Love that. Thank you so much for your time today, Brandy.
Thank you, so glad to be here.
Hey there. If you feel like something holds you back from reaching your true potential, listen up. I've got something incredible to share with you. I'm offering a free 7-day email program that helps you break through those blocks to get to the unshakable confidence and success that you deserve. Imagine starting each day with a clear mind, a strong sense of purpose, and the confidence to go after whatever it is that you truly want. This program guides you through a powerful process to uncover and then eliminate the root causes of your limitations. You receive daily emails with practical steps, immersive audio exercises, and techniques that help you rewrite your personal story. As your expert coach, I am there to support you every step of the way. Now, people have used this program to remove old triggers and create a new empowering mindset, or others have used it to remove resistance to taking certain actions. You can have these same kind of results or something different. If you feel ready to break free from what holds you back, the fears, the worries, the anxieties, those old patterns, whatever they are, and you're ready to embrace a life of confidence and fulfillment, go to xfactorhypnosis.com/transform. It's completely free and you gain a more empowered you. You can use the link in the show notes or just type xfactorhypnosis.com/transform into your favorite browser. Thanks for listening. And remember, stay curious, keep growing, and embrace your transformation.